in previous videos we talked about like the 25%.
Yes.
They're required to pay 25% time they stop paying rent.
Yes.
What happens to that? Did it now become due, or is that not due? Hi everybody, this is Luiz Morales. Welcome back to the Morales Group Show. This is episode number 80. Today we've got a repeat guest. His name is Brian Nomi. He's an attorney here in Ventura County, California. He's done previous episodes with us on the Eviction Moratorium, and this video is more of an update. The September 30th date where it's supposed to expire is past us, so we brought Brian on to give us an update. Welcome to the show, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you.
Good. So we have done a video almost on every time it's gone extended. Did it get extended on September 30th, 2021, or is it done in California?
It's done California statewide, but what people need to know is that certain jurisdictions may have local eviction moratorium in place, such as City of San Francisco City, but not County of Los Angeles, City of Santa Monica. So Los Angeles City and Santa Monica City are two local jurisdictions that I know of that have a continuing eviction moratorium despite the statewide ban being lifted. And it's not quite 100% back to normal yet. I'll just give you all a preview. You can evict starting on October. The eviction moratorium ended on September 30th. So starting October 1st, you can kick someone out if they didn't pay rent starting October 1st. But there is a provision in the new law which requires the landlord to apply for rental assistance. So the landlord is required to apply for the rental assistance. And then if the tenant either refuses to comply or the tenant gets turned down, then you can proceed to evict the tenant for non-payment of rent. So it gives you two possibilities. One is that the tenant applies for the rental assistance and gets the rental assistance and you get paid, in which case the landlord is paid, no problem. The other is after 20 days, if the tenant is either denied or does not cooperate, then the landlord can proceed to evict the tenant for non-payment of rent starting October 1st. So that's the big change that went into effect 6 days ago, basically.
Okay, so basically, in other words, the tenant is required October 1st to pay the full amount of rent that is owed October 1st.
Yes.
If they haven't paid that rent, they have to, there's a couple of different options. It's required that the landlord file for assistance. If the tenant did not cooperate in those 20 days and did not pay the rent, then the landlord can move forward with an eviction process.
Exactly.
What if they do apply in those 20 days? Does that mean that they have to wait for them to get approved? Before they can do anything, they have to wait for a response for them. Like, let's say they file on day 19. Does that mean that they have to wait until the approval process before you can start the eviction, or what does that mean?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I don't have the answer to that yet. I'm starting some non-payment cases right now. It looks like you have to actually request the rental assistance and wait the 20 days before you can file the case. So if rent's not paid on October 1st, you give a 3-day notice to pay rent on October 2nd, which expires then on October, let's say 5th. You would have to wait for the 20 days, which gets you to October 25th before you can even start the new eviction case based upon non-payment of rent. That's what it looks like to me. But anyway, there's my quick answer for you on that. That's my interpretation of the law. This is all brand new law. Everyone's struggling with understanding it, by the way. So, if you want to evict for other reasons, we can still do that too. But if you want to evict for non-payment of rent, there is a 20-day hold after the 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. That's what's going on right now.
Basically, okay. And then what happened in previous videos? We talked about like the 25%.
Yes.
They're required to pay 25% time they stop paying rent.
Yes.
What happens to that? Did it now become due, or is that not due anymore?
Here's the answer on that. So the whole COVID pandemic began in March of the year 2020. So we're talking about 18 months ago, or 18 or 19 months, depending on how you're counting it. So here's what everyone needs to know about the 25%. They've broken it down into 3 different time periods. The first time period is the protected time period, which goes from March 1st, 2020 until August 31st, 2020. And as to that, the tenant doesn't have to pay anything. It's considered civil debt only. There's not even the 25% that's required up until August 31st of 2020. Now, of course, let me break that down even further. If the tenant owed rent from before March 1st, 2020, like February of 2020 or before, you can just evict for non-payment of rent for that. That's always been the case over the last 1.5 years. That's fine. I don't see that happen, but I do see some people who have not paid rent from that, what we're calling the protected time period, March until August of 2020. You can't collect it at all. It's not even considered rent anymore. It's just what they're calling it civil debt, which means you can sue the tenant for the money in small claims court and try to get the money through small claims court, but you cannot evict the tenant for this protected time period. So that's the first time period that you need to know about. The second time period is called the transitional time period, which is September 1st, 2020 until September 30th of 2021. That is a 13-month time frame. During that time frame, the tenant is required to pay 25% of the rent. And in order to get that, you have to give a 15-day notice, which I'm happy to provide to anyone who requests it. But you give the tenant a 15-day notice saying, hey, tenant, you're supposed to pay 25% of the rent. And by the way, this raises a bunch of interesting questions which no one has answered to me. Like, what if the tenant paid, all the way through the year 2020, then just stopped paying in 2021, and then says, well, I paid you in full for October, November, December. That covers the 25% through most of 2021 as well. Well, I don't know. That's an interesting argument that the tenant might make. Even if the tenant has not made a 25% per month, every month payment, the tenant's saying, well, my full payments in the past constitutes a 25% total aggregated over the whole 13 months. That's an interesting thing, which no one has made a decision about. But it's a problem. So with regard to that, yes, the tenant is required to pay at least the 25% for the September 1st through September of 2020 until September 30th of 2021. If they don't pay that 15-day notice to pay rent or quit, you can evict based upon that if you've given the 15-day notice to pay rent or quit. As to the rest of the money, it's civil debt or apply for rental assistance, and maybe the rental assistance will help cover the shortfall that has not been paid. And this is a very common situation. I have lots of clients right now who haven't been paid rent for the last 3 to 6 months, or at least they've only gotten partial payments. I don't see, I do a ton of landlord-tenant law. I don't see anyone who's not been paid a penny from March of 2020 until September 30th of 2021. That I just don't see. I'm sure that there are some people in the city of Los Angeles that are doing exactly that, but I just don't see it here. Normally, we're dealing with tenants who are making partial payments, and so it becomes a thorny issue. But my advice to every landlord and every tenant is apply for the rental assistance. There's more money that the state of California through the Department of Housing has than has been spent by far. There's something like $30 billion that's been allocated. Only $5 billion of that has been used so far. And the state of California is eager to pay this money to deserving tenants. So apply for the free money and get the free money. That may cover all. They're paying 100%. They're no longer paying 75%. They're paying 100% of all rent that's due. If you qualify, the tenant has to show some sort of financial need. The landlord and the tenant both have to cooperate together. They both have to make the application and get the rent assistance paid. But if it all works, then the landlord will get paid 100% of the rent, which is great. The tenant no longer has any debt. The landlord is paid in full. Everyone wins. So that's what you need to know about the transition time period up to September 30th of 2021. And now what we're in right now is called the COVID recovery period, which started on October 1st, 2021. That was 6 days ago that started. During the COVID recovery period, that's when we go into the rule, all rent is due, but landlord cannot evict unless you show proof that you've applied for the rental assistance and 20 days have passed. So I have a feeling that a lot of, I'm giving out 3-day notices right now and tenants are paying actually. So, I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem. I think the big problem is just getting people to get the rental assistance as much as they can so that hopefully the tenants who are good can be kept. And if the tenants are just refusing to pay, we'll find some way to evict them somehow or another. So those are the three time periods. I'm going to recap it. First is the protected time period, which is basically the first 6 months of the pandemic. Next is the transition, and you can't collect any rent. Next is the transition time period, where the tenant only has to pay 25% of the rent, September 1st, 2020, September 30th of 2021, and now we're in the COVID recovery period. One big question to me is, how long is the COVID recovery period going to last? No one has an answer to that yet. But we have to wait the 20 days for rent, which makes it still a somewhat unattractive way to get a tenant out. But as far as tenants who can't pay rent, if the rental assistance covers it, great. The landlord has many other tools, by the way. I don't know if you have more questions about those three time periods, ask them now. Otherwise, I'm going to launch into a different angle on this whole thing.
Yeah. The 75%, obviously they're required to pay 25% now. The 75%, does that become civil debt as well?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so basically, if they pay the 25% from that period of time, from that 1 year, September 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021, they're okay as long as they pay this month's rent. If they
Correct.
don't pay that, then basically you as a landlord have to apply for assistance before you can actually evict them.
Yes.
If you don't apply for the assistance, it's my understanding that you can't evict them in other
Exactly.
unless you have applied for the assistance. That's that provision right there. Now, what I wanted to be clear on, because I have a client that's selling a property in or wants to sell a property in Los Angeles, and we talked to an attorney out there, and they basically said that that city still has protections. So
yes.
we're speaking right now for some cities in California, or we're speaking in California in general. That doesn't mean that some cities don't have additional provisions. Ventura County, it sounds like it doesn't have any additional provisions.
Exactly.
Basically, you can, as long as you apply for the assistance or the tenant doesn't pay the 25%, then you can move forward with the eviction. Now, Brian, obviously, I had situations where landlords didn't believe that they can evict the tenant throughout the entire pandemic. We worked on a couple of them where we were able to help the client evict for them. I think that was the direction that you were probably going to go into the interview. Can you just elaborate on that just really quickly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But before I do, I'm going to mention one thing. We talked about civil debt. So let's say that the tenant has not paid, owes you some rent from either the protected or the transition time period. For that rent that is not paid, the civil debt, you can still collect it, but you have to go to small claims court, which starts on November 1st. The courts are not accepting this, but it's the new enhanced small claims procedure where the landlord can file. There used to be a cap of 10 cases per year. Now the landlord can file as many as they want. There used to be a cap of $10,000 per case. Now the cap has been removed. So a landlord can now sue a tenant for $50,000 or $100,000 as many times per year as they want for this civil debt, as long as it's related to rent. So that's, to me, that's worthless. You file a small claims suit against a tenant who owes you $100,000 of debt, you're never going to get paid. There's the bottom line right there. So, the only leverage that a landlord usually has is, I'm going to kick you out by evicting you, or I'm going to give you an eviction record. That's the only way that you ever get a tenant to pay. If it's just a small claims case, I'm going to give you 95 to 98% odds you're never going to collect a penny of that small claims case, even if you win the small claims case. But I want people to know that it's out there. Small claims court is very easy. No need for a lawyer. But you have to wait until November 1st, 2021 before you can file your small claims case to collect on the civil debt. So that's completing my thought on the whole rent payment, protected transition, and COVID recovery time periods. So let's transition over to, let's say that you want to get a tenant out for other reasons. That is now fair game throughout California. Basically, we're back to the eviction moratorium. That eviction moratorium is now over. And so we're back to where we were basically at the end of 2019 or beginning of 2020. And I'll just summarize that as quickly and succinctly as I can. So in 2019, California for the first time enacted the rent cap and just cause law, basically statewide rent cap and just cause law, which means that if you own multifamily properties, which means a duplex where a owner does not live in one duplex or anything else with more than one property, or a corporation owns the property, those are now subject to rent cap, which means 5% plus consumer price index, which is now 3%. So basically you can only raise the rent by 8% per year. Under previous law, you could raise the rent by 1,000,000% per year if you wanted to. Now it's limited to 8% per year by law, unless you're an individual who owns a single family house, condo, or townhouse, a separately sellable unit. So now if you're exempt, you can raise the rent as much as you want. But the big thing about this is the whole just cause provision. Now, in order to evict a tenant, you have to, again, in multifamily, you have to have just cause, whereas previously you didn't have to have any reason. Again, the exception to this is if you're an individual who owns a house or condo, you don't have to give any reason, which is great. Previously, over the COVID eviction moratorium, the reasons that we were using, which were the only reasons allowed by law, are we're selling the house. That's the first one. We want to have a family member move into the house. That's the second one. Or we want to do a demolition or substantial remodeling of the property. That's the third one. Those are the three grounds that we were using for the most part to terminate tenancies during the COVID eviction moratorium. That's now gone. Now we can evict a tenant just because I don't like you anymore. I don't want to have you as my tenant anymore. You don't have to give any reason. So that's a huge tool that the landlords now have, which is available to them. You can just kick out a tenant for no reason, which is what I suggest people do. So let me tell you two things let me give you an example. You can't kick out a tenant because I hate black people. That's housing discrimination. So yeah. I don't know any landlord, I have never had any landlord stupid enough to say I hate black people or anything like that. I don't know. Honestly, I see landlords all the time that say, I don't like the tenant because the tenant is tearing up the house and having loud parties. That's fine. You can kick out the tenant because the tenant's a jerk. You just can't kick out the tenant because of race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. You can't use those as your reasons. But again, what I'm seeing is that most landlords just don't like the tenant because the tenant doesn't take good care of the place, so the tenant's a jerk. The tenant, is just not very nice. Those are the main reasons. So nowadays, you don't have to give any reason. You can just say, I don't want the tenant in my property anymore. That does not apply for multifamily properties. For multifamily properties, you're back into the same problem where you can only kick out the tenants if you intend to do substantial remodeling. The landlord is going to move in himself, which is not likely, especially on larger multifamily properties. Or those are the main reason. Or you're going to sell it, perhaps. That's another possible reason to get someone out. One thing I want to really emphasize to people is don't use the old leases. Don't use the lease that you got from Staples or you picked up from Office Max or something. You pick up a lease online and you just modify it. It will not have the California rent cap just cause provisions. And if you're an individual owner, like if you're a mom and pop owner who owns a single family house or a condo, you need to use a lease that gives you the most rights as possible as a landlord, which I will help you do. The California Association of Realtors, CAR form lease, very good. It's pretty good about waiving the rent cap just cause law. If you're a real estate agent and you have access to the CAR forms, the term that you'll type in is RCJC. You can do a waiver using the California forms. You can, if you have a tenant, existing tenant who's a good tenant, you may want to do just a notice of change of terms of tenancy. That's CTT, change of terms of tenancy, along with the RCJC, rent cap just cause addendum. That gets your property out of the rent cap just cause law, so that you can now you can raise the rent as much as you want. You can kick the tenant out for any reason that you want. Or if you want to give the tenant a new lease, make sure that you give the tenant a new lease, which has all these provisions already built in. That's another good thing to know. And so just to complete this thought, if you are owning multifamily properties, such as duplex and above, duplex to 500 unit, whatever it is, anything that's a multifamily property, You can still terminate that tenant anytime with a 30-day notice during the first year. So if you're going to have problems with that tenant, you're probably going to know about it during the first year. So please don't give the tenant a 2-year, 3-year lease. Give the tenant a month-to-month right off the bat, or 6 months maximum, because during the first 6 months, you're going to know if the tenant is a pain in your butt or not. And so if the tenant's a pain in your butt, give them a 30-day notice with no reason. That's a great way to terminate that tenant. After the first year, then all of a sudden the rent cap just cause all kicks in, and now you can only raise the rent by a certain amount on multi-unit properties. You can only kick the tenant out for certain specific legal reasons on multifamily properties. So be very careful about who you let stay for more than 1 year in your multifamily property. Make sure that you really vetted the tenant. And if it's not a multifamily property, if it's just mom and pop who own a condo or a single family house, make sure your lease is specific to waive the rent cap just cause law. It's a mistake that I see a lot of people making. A lot of my clients are making that. I mean, they have a lease from 2014 and they keep using it, and it's a bad lease. So please update your lease to the year 2020 or 2021. Use the CAR form or contact me and get my form. Get your lease up to date so that you're no longer subject to the 5% plus CPI rent cap, and you can kick out the tenant. You have more latitude, more reasons to be able to evict your tenant for various, there's all kinds of breaches, all kinds of reasons why a landlord would want a tenant out of the property. Anyway, that's my quick summary of rent cap just cause and the need to really update your leases. That kind of takes you through 2009 all the way up to the present, and reasons why we can kick out a tenant. So let's pause there and give you a chance to ask questions about that before I move into my next thing.
I think you answered pretty much everything on that.
Okay.
So let's move to the next.
The next thing that I have is commercial evictions, which is right now, there's no limitation on commercial evictions. Similarly, there may be a local ordinance, like there may be a city of Ventura ordinance. So you need to check that. But by and large, throughout Ventura County, throughout the state of California, there is no limitation on commercial evictions. So all you have to do is 3-day pay or quit or 30-day notice of termination. And there's no requirement that you apply for rental assistance, because businesses and business properties do not get rental assistance. So we're pretty much back to normal on commercial or business tenancies. So that's good news. I'm not speaking to City of LA, City of Santa Monica, or City of San Francisco. Those are specialized things. I can send you to someone who's a specialist in that, and then those people can advise you. But with regard to commercial business property, back to normal. It's just residential that's a little bit funky right now. Make sure that you know what the rules are with regard to residential properties. So anyway, that kind of, those are the main subjects that I wanted to talk about, which is the transition protected and the new COVID-19 time period of rent, the reasons why you can kick someone out just for no reason, and then commercial tenancies. Those are the main areas that I wanted to talk about. Big changes as of October 1st. And I see you have a bunch of other.
Just a little summary.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so I think the other questions that I have were pretty much covered in the in what you said. Just a little summary for our viewers. The California eviction moratorium is gone. Obviously, it varies by city and county. Some counties or cities may have additional restrictions. Update your listing agreements. That's also a gold nugget. Do not use listing agreements from 2014, 15. There are certain clauses that you have to give. Also, the notices are different now, according to Brian. If the tenant is behind on their payment, if you're going to apply for rental assistance, there are specific notices. If you're going after the 25% that is due, there's a specific notice for that. This is not the time to write a handwritten letter to them and asking them for this. It must be done the right way in order to be enforceable. And I think the last thing that you touched on is just in commercial real estate, there is no eviction moratorium. Obviously, it varies by county. And I think overall, that's a pretty good summary of what is going on. You have to apply. If you're going to evict, you have to show that you applied for rental assistance, basically, before you can actually move forward with the eviction process.
And I'll tell you something about rental assistance. You and I did a video about this just a couple months ago. What I'm seeing my clients tell me is that it's taking 3 to 4 months to actually from the time that you apply to the time that you get paid the rental assistance, but it seems to be speeding up. It seems to be working more quickly nowadays.
Yeah.
I think the Department of Housing has ironed out some of the kinks on this. So if you do the rental assistance application correctly, I think within a month or two, you should know that it's either approved or not approved, and hopefully even actually get the check from the Department of Housing for whatever money that they're willing to give to you. So, the law right now requires you to wait for 20 days. I don't know why they made it a 20-day time period, but I'm assuming that in 20 days, the tenant is either going to not apply, or you're going to have a decision either approving or disapproving the rental assistance within 20 days. But, here's something that could happen. Like, let's say that you wait the 20 days and then no action's taken and you file the eviction lawsuit. Then while the eviction lawsuit is pending, then all of a sudden the rental assistance gets approved. That would be a bit of a mess, because then the landlord, I assume, would want to keep. Well, I don't know. Maybe the landlord wants to get the money, or maybe the landlord wants to get rid of the tenant. It's hard to say. But that's one potential mess that I see coming. The other aspect of this is, when is the rental assistance going to end? I mean, someday the Department of Housing is going to stop giving out free rent to people in California. I don't know when that day is going to come. It could be the end of this year. It could be sometime into next year. So when the rental assistance program comes to an end, which it's going to come to an end someday, are they going to change it back to just the way we were before, with standard 3-day pay or quit and no more 20-day waiting period? And there was one other question you asked me, is there going to be another eviction moratorium in the future? That's a question that you asked me in some of the notes that you sent to me. My answer to that is, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that we're on the recovery path, but COVID gets bad and people get scared. Guess what? I think that it would be very easy to see politicians putting into effect another eviction moratorium, statewide. USA wide, the Supreme Court has ruled that the Centers for Disease Control eviction moratorium was illegal. So in the country of the United States of America as a whole, there is no eviction moratorium. It's just California has specific rules. And then within California, there are certain jurisdictions that have even more specific rules. So like I say, everything that I say does not apply to the cities of LA and Santa Monica and a few others. So those are just some things that people need to be aware of.
So moral of the story, there's a chance that you get 100% of the rent paid if you apply for rental assistance. That might be a good option for you, because the other options, you're only getting paid potentially 25%, and you have to go get 75% in civil debt. Anything else, Brian, that you think would be of value to our viewers?
Boy, we covered all this. I mean, I'm still studying the law. I'm one of the few people who spends every single day, all day long, just doing eviction law. And so, and I'm still learning new things today. We're 6 days into it, or 7 days into it right now. So there's more to come in the future, I'm sure. But what we were touching on before is right. I mean, I see people. It used to be possible 10 years ago that a landlord who's intelligent could probably deal with all this themselves. It's become such a complicated issue right now, especially with all the COVID rules. You need to talk to someone who's an expert. Please talk to me. I'm, as you know, when you call me on the phone, I answer my own phone. I'm there for people. I take phone calls all the time, and I never charge for phone calls. Get me or someone like me in your area. I mean, I know that this video is being watched statewide or even countrywide. Get someone who knows what they're doing, who does the most evictions. Here's what I tell people, and I'll just say it for everyone's benefit. You want the person who's doing the most evictions in your county, like the 1 or 2 or 3 people who are doing the most evictions in your county. That's the person you want to talk about. Talk to you about your rental situation. You don't want someone that did one eviction 2 or 3 years ago. That person is not going to know what they need to know to get the job done for you. In Ventura County right now, I'm number 1. I'm the person who's doing the most evictions, and I'm a nice guy. I'm happy to talk to people. I take phone calls, texts, and emails all day long. I respond immediately. Please get the right advice. Don't get your advice from your Uncle Manny, or go down to Staples and buy a landlord tenant book. You're not going to get the right advice that way. Talk to someone who's doing it right now, who's doing it the right way. So I'm out there for people, and I'm offering that service to anyone who wants to reach out to touch me. And I know you're going to put my contact info. My website is a great way to reach out to me. My website has all my info, my email and my phone number, which also my only phone number is this phone number right here, which takes text messages. And that's what you'll find right on my website. So that's what I'm offering to everyone. Get the right information and make an intelligent decision. I mean, real estate is the number one way for families to build wealth that I'm aware of. I mean, it beats the stock market even for the most part. I mean, for most families. So, your home, your real estate, incredibly important investment. Make sure you get the right advice. Make sure you're making the right decisions so that you can maximize the returns on your investment for yourself and your family.
Perfect. Okay. Well, all right. Thank you so much. This was episode number 80. This is the Morales Group Show. Today we had attorney Brian Nomi. He gave us an update on the eviction moratorium for California. Thank you so much for being on the show, Brian. I'll include your phone number in the show notes and all of your information. But thanks again for doing this for our viewers.
Great. Nice to talk to you again, Jose Luis.